Now it's time to look at compound intervals on the whiteboard. So down here I've written 3 gigantic intervals, and we are going to practice identifying them and writing the intervallic label, which is comprised of the distance and the quality. Now to figure out this question, we're going to use these following steps. The first thing we are going to do is reduce the interval to its simple form so that we can see what's going on more clearly. And then while we are looking at the simple form, we are going to calculate the distance and remind ourselves what the compound version of that distance is. And then we're going to calculate the quality of the simple interval and remind ourselves what we're going to take that quality and insert it into the compound intervals label. So let's get started. D to F sharp. Now that interval looks really big. You could just sit down on your exam and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and count all the way up. But I'm telling you, it's a waste of time. And it's not the fastest way to find the answer. And when you're nervous on your exam and you're counting little lines like that, you'll almost certainly make a mistake. So don't bother. Do what I'm telling you to do and shrink it and write out the simple version. So if I bring this F sharp down an octave, it would look something like this. I'm going to write the simple form of the interval right beside the compound version so that I can see. So I kept the bottom note the same and I transposed this down an octave. Now this should look like an interval we are all familiar with. It's a third, and D is the bottom note, and then F sharp is the top note, and F sharp is the third note of a D major scale, so it's a major third. Isn't that easy? So we've gained a lot more information at a lot faster rate from the simple version. Now let's take this and apply it to the compound label. Back at the piano, we learned that thirds and tenths are the same thing. The compound version of a third is a tenth, because if you transpose the top note of a third up an octave, you get a tenth. So we can go ahead and write tenth here. And because this is a major third, we know for sure that this is a major tenth, and now we have the correct intervallic label for this compound interval. That was a lot faster than actually counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It is a tenth. You can count for proofreading after you're done your exam, when you have extra time. Let's do it again. So over here, we have a C flat to a G. Now don't waste your time counting. Life is short. Let's bring this G down and we will write the simple version of this interval. There, that's much faster. C to G. You certainly know by now that that's a fifth. And if I cover this with my hand, I know that C to G is a perfect fifth. And since the C was lowered and the space became bigger, it's a diminished fifth. Okay, now let's take this information and apply it to the compound label. The equivalent of a fifth is a twelfth. We learned that over during the piano video I made. So this is almost certainly a twelfth, and again you can proofread when your exam's done. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Look at that. I'm not lying to you, it's a twelfth. And the quality is the same. It's also a diminished twelfth. Done. We have a major tenth and a diminished twelfth. And last one, an E natural to a C. Don't waste your time counting. Create the simple version discreetly beside the question. E to C is a minor sixth, because C sharp is the real sixth note of an E major scale, so that's one lower. I know that a sixth is equivalent to a 13th. So the compound version must be 13. And the quality is the same. It's a minor 13th. So this is a minor 13th. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I wasn't lying. It's a 13th. And it's also minor. So remember, when you're identifying compound intervals, on a timed exam, you don't have time to count. Just create the simple version and extract your information from that label. Now we are going to practice creating our own compound intervals based on what the question tells us to do. So here down here, we have an augmented tenth, a perfect 12th, and a minor 14th. And we are going to write notes above all of these to create the intervals. We are going to do steps that are very similar to what we just did. Instead of counting all the way up, we are going to translate the intervallic label to its simple interval equivalent. And then we're going to use that information to create our compound interval. So let's start with this augmented tenth. So I know that a tenth is actually the same thing as a third. So over here on the side of my page, I'm going to try to create an augmented third, and then I'm going to transpose the top note up to create a tenth. So I'll write a secret A over here. What's a third above A? C. And now what's an augmented third above A? I know that the third note of an A major scale is C sharp. So if I raise that C sharp again, the interval gets bigger and it becomes augmented. So an augmented third above the note A is C double sharp. Now back in compound interval land, all I have to do is transpose that top note up to this C double sharp, and I should be left with an augmented tenth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10th. There we go, that's the right answer. So I made the simple version of the interval first, and then blew it up and created the compound interval after. Let's do the same thing over here. Instead of writing a perfect 12th and trying to figure out what that is, we know that a 12th is the same as a fifth. You have to have that memorized. So let's rewrite the G discretely over here and put a fifth up. We land on D. Perfect. Is G to D a perfect fifth? Yes, it is. So all we have to do now is transpose that top note up an octave, and we should be left with a perfect 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Hooray for us. And the last one, minor 14th. At the piano, we learn that a 14th is the same as a 7th. So what we're really doing is writing a minor 7th. Let's see what that looks like over here. In secret, a 7th above B flat is A. And if I add an A flat, that's a minor 7th. Now all I have to do is transpose this A flat up an octave to create a minor 14th. And that's a lot of ledger lines. There's C, E, G, and A flat is this high thing over here. That's a big interval. So there we have it. We've created our own compound intervals, and we did it by taking a step back and making the simple form of all the intervals first. This would be difficult if you didn't memorize the relationships between the compound intervals and the simple intervals. So you have to make sure you do that first. Seconds are ninths, thirds are tenths, fourths are 11ths, fifths are 12ths, sixths are 13ths, and sevenths are 14ths. And octaves become 15ths. And now finally we are going to invert compound intervals. Now, I gave a disclaimer about this process when I introduced it at the piano in a previous video, but the method we are going to use to invert compound intervals are in concordance with the RCM's Level 8 theory textbook. If you are watching this and you are a university student or you are doing a music theory exam for an institution that is not the Royal Conservatory of Music in Toronto, you might want to check, because they might want something different than what I'm describing to you down here. I know in university, when you flip a compound interval, you don't get simple intervals. You get another compound interval. So there, I've said it. So unless this doesn't really apply to you unless you are doing an RCM Level 8 theory exam. Here's what the steps are. First, we are going to figure out what interval I've actually drawn, and then after that, to invert it, we are going to transpose the top note down an octave, and we are going to transpose the bottom note up an octave, and we will be left with a simple interval. And then we are going to label that simple interval and see what it turned out to be. So down here I wrote a C sharp and an F. Let's just start by figuring out what that interval is, and I'll do my quick simple interval maneuvering. I'm going to reduce it to its simple form. This is a fourth. C to F is a fourth, and I know that C natural to F is a perfect fourth, so since this is smaller than that, this must be a diminished fourth. And because I know that a fourth is equivalent to an 11th, and the quality must also be diminished. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So this is a diminished 11th. Now what we are going to do is we are going to transpose the top note down an octave, and we're going to transpose the C sharp up an octave. So I'm going to bring this F down to here. My black marker is on its last legs. And then the C sharp will be transposed up here. So we transposed the top note down an octave, and we transposed the top note up an octave. And again, we were left with an interval that is of a lesser distance than an octave. So this is a simple interval, and that's a compound interval. Now what is this simple interval? F to C is a fifth, and the opposite of diminished is augmented. Is that an augmented interval? F to C is a perfect fifth, and this is F to C sharp, so that's bigger than a perfect, so it must be augmented. Correct. And if you look down here at the simple version we did, we know that that's the inversion of this. A diminished fourth, when inverted, is also an augmented fifth. So there you have it. So on the Level 8 RCM theory exam, when you're flipping and inverting compound intervals, all you do is transpose the top down one octave and the bottom note up one octave, and you will be left with a simple interval, and you can label that. And that will be accepted as the inversion of the compound interval you were originally looking at.